We are in 3 John, and I'm told that last week there was a look-alike that was teaching, or at least that's what a couple of our members who have bad eyesight said. They said, Evan and I look alike. I told them I'm going to go tell him you said that about him. But no, we're thankful that Evan filled the class last week, and he was to teach on Gaius. We're going to hit a little bit on Gaius in just a moment, but for now, as we get started with 3 John, what's that? He didn't talk about Gaius? He talked about Diotrephes. That boy must want preeminence. I told him to talk about Gaius. Well, then you're going to hear about Diotrephes twice. And you're going to hear about Gaius some tonight too. That being said, as we get started with 3 John, we have set the... let's skip past this introductory information. We've outlined it thus. We start with the salutation, which is verses 1 and 2. And in that salutation, there's a discussion of John giving a greeting that's in the truth. He's expressing his love that is in the truth. And he exhorts and prays for Gaius to prosper, even as his soul prospers. Now, that's an interesting statement. To the well-beloved Gaius, whom I love in the truth, I pray above all things, or wish above all things, that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. That's a powerful statement. There's some folks that if John said that to them, they'd say, John, why you got to be so ugly? Well, I want you to prosper physically like you're prospering spiritually. For some folks, if they were prospering physically like they were prospering spiritually based on the treasures they've laid up in heaven, they'd be flat broke. They'd be homeless and starving. That thou mayest prosper and be in health. He mentions prosperity, he mentions health. There are some folks that if their physical health was based on the effort that they put into their spiritual health, they wouldn't be able to stand. They wouldn't be able to walk because they don't ever eat or they don't ever exercise. John didn't have to worry about Gaius receiving this and saying, John, that's mean. I pray that you'll prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. That's a commendation to Gaius. Now he says, picking up at verse 3, oh, by the way, before we move forward, even as thy soul prospereth. The word translated prosperous, prosper and prospereth, the Greek word is ouadeao. Don't ask me to repeat it. But the idea is to be aided in travel or aided on a journey, that you may successfully reach your destination. Now that's an interesting word to use for prosper because there are other words in the Greek language that convey the idea of prosper, but with what John's about to say to Gaius pertaining to how Gaius helps others on their way, he's essentially saying, I pray God to help you on your way, because you've been doing it for everybody else. Could he say that to me? Can he say that to you? So, we keep moving forward. There's the salutation. Now let's talk about Gaius. We're going to, there are 3 major names given in the book of 3 John. And the easiest way to outline this book in terms of its primary discussion is to outline it based on those names. And each one has a distinct reputation. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. Gaius has a good name. In fact, we're going to designate him as having a generous name. We'll talk about Diotrephes in a moment, but for now, Gaius, a generous name. His name is of Latin derivation, and it carries the idea of Lord. Keep that in mind because his name connects to the concept of nobility and station. But he doesn't go around flaunting the idea. No, here's one. His name seems to mean Lord or person in authority, yet he serves. He that is greatest among you, let him be your servant. That's the mindset that Gaius has. John says, I rejoice greatly when the brethren came and testified, martyreo, they gave witness of the truth that's in you. They told me you're faithful. They told me you follow the truth. The truth is in you and you're walking in truth. We don't have time to go back and look at all the times that John has mentioned truth and living in truth and walking in truth. It's such a common theme that it should just resonate in our ears at this point. But we move forward to verse 3. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Gaius' faithfulness was a source of great joy. John says, I don't have a greater joy than to know that those with whom I've labored, those that I've converted, those that I've taught, that they're faithful. He expressed that idea to the elect lady of 2 John as well. So, Gaius' faithfulness is a great source of joy. Let's hit the pause button. He didn't take it for granted. He didn't just write and say, hey, I'm glad to hear you're behaving. You know you're supposed to do that. I'm glad to hear you're still a part of the church. You know you're supposed to be that. This is called positive reinforcement. And a lot of times we're not too good at it. As parents, spouses, and as brethren, John says, I rejoice to know that you're faithful. I rejoice to know that you walk in truth. I rejoice to know that you are still part of the Lord's church and a thriving, beneficial part. Do we truly express to one another how thankful we are for each other, for our presence? Yes, it can become monotonous. Good to see you today. But when we mean it, it's good to see you today. I'm glad you're here. And thank you for being here tonight. Do you know how depressing it is when my wife's the only one that shows up when I teach a Bible class? Thank you for being here tonight. No, and not that you're there. I'm talking about when you're the only one. John says, I'm thankful that you're faithful. Let's convey that idea to each other. Let's give that positive reinforcement that Gaius needed, that all of our brethren need. So, no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Gaius' faithfulness was a great source of joy, but also his faithfulness is a great source of help. We pick up at verse 5. John says, Beloved, thou doest faithfully. Doest poieo. This is the idea of just an action in general. Thou doest faithfully whatsoever thou doest. This word carries the idea of toil and labor. You have faithful actions in all of your toiling and labor that you do to the brethren and to strangers. Gaius, you're faithful. We can count on you in all of your hard work and labor to brethren and to strangers. The English Standard translates this as to brethren, strangers as they are. Gaius, you are known for the kindness that you extend to the brethren who are strangers. You've never met them before they come your way. Question. Can you remember the names and faces of every person that's visited here over the course of the last 2 months? It can be difficult because there's several folks that visit. And there are times when we may be able to interact with folks, but when it comes to a strong relationship, there's a sense in which we're still strangers. Yet they can go out from us and tell what they've seen and what they've experienced and who we are. I've taught with some preachers that tend to travel around a bit. And a frightening description was given of visiting with a congregation that had a preaching school. Walked in that evening to a Wednesday night service. No one greeted. No one said hello. No one kind of helped direct and show where the auditorium was or express any real interest. And no one said a word to this preacher and his family that were visiting until the preacher there recognized him and went and started speaking with him. And really, that was the only person that said much to him all evening. That's frightening. In November, we've got a fellow coming to conduct more than an evangelism seminar. This is This is intended to be an absolute microscope focused on evangelism, to steer us wholeheartedly in the direction of winning souls, working it into everything that we do. His name's Rob Whitaker. He was with us earlier this year. He did the seminar with the students at the school. And on Wednesday night, he came here. And he sat right back there, right about where Sister E is sitting now. And I came in to speak with him. I was kind of nervous because you know, you never know. Sometimes a person comes to visit and it may not be. Rob, how you doing? Scott, this place is amazing. Scott, these people are wonderful. And if you know Rob, you know that he says it wholeheartedly every time he says something. Scott, this is a wonderful church. This church is ready to grow. That's what he said about y'all. The point. John wrote to Gaius and he said, you do faithfully whatever you do. And the brethren have come and testified about how you treated them. The brethren will testify about how we treat them when they come for a visit. And by the way, so will the non-brethren and the folks from the community. Are we open and aware, and are we cognizant of those faces that are unfamiliar to us? And please keep in mind, it can be difficult to know whether a face ought to be familiar or not. Especially for those that are new to the congregation, if they've just moved here, or if they're recent converts. It can be hard to know if someone is a member that just sits on the other side of this auditorium, or a member that just hadn't been in a few weeks because that's one of those flippant attendees. Or sometimes it's a matter of they go to greet an individual and they say, welcome. They say, well, I'm here a lot. I'm here with Mom. And it's hard to remember everyone's extended family. That being said, I would rather have to get a person's name 3, 4, 30, 40 times than to be worried about, oh, I don't know if I met him before or not. I don't want to look awkward. When you look like this, you get used to being awkward. Folks remember how they're treated when they visit the services of a congregation of God's people. I pray that what was said on that Wednesday night when I was speaking with Rob is what's always said about us. I'm thankful for you, for who you are, for what you do. And as John would tell Gaius, we need to tell each other, let's keep it up. So let's move forward. Gaius' faithfulness is a great source of help. Verse 5, you're doing faithfully whatever you do to the brethren and strangers. They've come, they've borne witness, verse 6, of your charity, agape, before the church. They've told the whole congregation how you act. By the way, that happens too. And for some folks, it ought to be awfully sobering. Because there are places that when folks go out and tell how they treat visitors, I believe the proper pronunciation would be embarrassing. They've borne witness of thy charity before the church. Gaius, they've come and they've told us who you are and what you do. And Gaius, they're coming back. Verse 6, he says, whom, if thou bring them forward on their journey after a godly sort, thou shalt do well. These visiting strangers, apparently missionaries, because bring forward on their journey is the idea of giving support, aiding along the leg of a trip. And neither Paul nor John nor any of the apostles were encouraging Christians just to go out on freeloading vacations and expect the brethren to put them up and send them on their way, as though this bum's joy trip ought to be at my expense. No, these are visiting ministers of the gospel in one form or another, missionaries or servants that are doing the Lord's work. Don't miss the fact that they went out for His name's sake. Verse 7. You have prompeo, you've sent them forward on their way. This is the description given of what the church at Antioch did for Paul, Acts 15. It also Acts 20, Acts 21. If you bring them forward on their way after a godly sort, you do well. Let's say they're missionaries. It's sad the number of times preachers, or particularly missionaries, are asked to come speak or visit a congregation, and they drive halfway across the country or across the state. And gas prices are like $40 a gallon now, and so they've invested half of a house payment just to get there, and they're not even compensated for mileage. And yes, it does happen. Thankfully, we have other brethren that compensate so well that, by and large, when one congregation doesn't, it's balanced out in the end. But it shouldn't be the case that there are those that don't. John says, when you bring them forward on their way after a godly sort, you do well. Converse of that, if you don't, you're not. So, here's an open heart. He's receiving the brethren. Verse 6, with charity. Verse 7, that for their name's sake they went forth, and they're taking nothing of the Gentiles. Here are these ministers that are going out and they're teaching, and they're taking the approach that Paul took in Thessalonica, that Paul took with the Corinthians. He's not, these teachers are not expecting to be compensated by the people that they teach. There's a reason Paul labored with his own hands in Thessalonica. He didn't want to be a burden to them. There's a reason he did that in Corinth. He didn't want to be a burden to them. Later, he expressed a bit of a lamentation, forgive me for this wrong, 2 Corinthians 12, because he should have expected them to pick up some responsibility earlier than what they had done. Those things being said, these are Christians going out and they're teaching the Gentiles, the lost, and they're not trying to be compensated from the new converts they're reaching. John says they need help. Understandable. That's why we support and help missionaries. Thus, he says, verse 11, we therefore ought to receive such. Open hearts to help, open hands to send forward on their way, and open homes. Receive such. Allow them to enter, that we might be fellow helpers to the truth. When Paul wrote to the Philippians from a Roman prison, and he spoke to them about how now at the last their care of him had flourished yet again, where they wanted to help previously, but they lacked opportunity, Philippians 4. Once you get to verse 17 and 18, he said, I rejoice that this care has prospered again. Not that I desire a gift, but I desire fruit that may abound to your account. The help that the Philippians sent to Paul, Paul saw as fruit that abounded to their account. John, in talking about those that would support and help the visiting missionaries that need supported on their way, said when you help them, you're fellow helpers to the truth. He's not talking about fellow helpers to their vacation, you're fellow helpers to the truth. There's a principle here that we've got to embrace. The one that stands up there in that baptistry and has the privilege of baptizing a soul, seldom, if ever, is that the only one that's worked to win that soul. There are some preachers that keep track of the number of people they baptize as though it's some kind of feather in the hat, failing to realize that more often than not, most of the work done to reach and appeal to those souls and establish the contact in the beginning started long before the preacher ever shook that soul's hand. There are some folks that baptize a whole lot of people, but they might have a little bit of a Diotrephes mindset instead of a Gaius mindset. John told Gaius, we're fellow helpers of the truth. You may not be the person that's able to conduct the Bible studies, but you may be the best point of contact in order to establish a rapport with people and develop an interest in them, for them to want to visit with the church or meet other Christians. Not every member of the church is going to be efficient and skilled in every aspect of what it means to win a soul. But brethren, we can work together. We can be fellow helpers of the truth. Let's keep moving forward. Open hearts, open hands, and open homes. Why? Why should we help these people? Because they've gone out for His name's sake, verse 7. They're not trying to compensate themselves from the people they teach, verse 7. And because we want to be fellow helpers of the truth, verse 8. There's Gaius, the one with a generous name. His faithfulness is a source of great joy. His faithfulness is a source of great help. Let's be Gaius. Let's not be the next one named. Diotrephes. Now, Diotrephes, verse 9 begins with the words, I wrote unto the church. Sometimes we read through Scripture and we just, I wrote unto the church by Diotrephes who loveth. That's not likely the tone John had in mind as he penned these words. In fact, you can't help but wonder, it could go through Gaius' mind, John's giving him a good name, a good reputation to maintain. But it could go through Gaius' mind like it can so often go through ours. Well, I've helped these folks before, and there's only so much help I can give before I'm flat broke. Gaius, I tried to get somebody else to help. I wrote to the church. But Diotrephes, who philos, love, friendship of, and then that protos, front, first. He loves to be out front. He loves to be first. He loves to have the preeminence. The only thing with which he's a friend is his own ego. He loves to have the preeminence. I wrote to the church. Why do you think he wrote to the church? I wrote to the church to help these missionaries. I wrote to the church to help these people, but Diotrephes, who love have the preeminence, receiveth us not. Notice John didn't say receiveth them not. He receiveth us not. It's been said that never is man so small as when he's big in his own sight. That's Diotrephes. Diotrephes is the preacher that always has to be the one doing the announcements or making the statements. It always has to be the one getting the spotlight. Diotrephes is the elder that always has to be the one that's the spokesman. Diotrephes is the Christian who always has to have enough of his hand in every pie that he feels like he can take credit for everything. And there are a whole lot of times, a whole lot of brethren think Diotrephes is quite the fella. He loves to have the preeminence. And he receives us not. Not only did he not receive those missionaries, he wouldn't receive John. Thus, he's not only rejecting aid to them, he's rejecting the authority of John. By the way, Matthew 10:40, Jesus said, He that receiveth you receiveth me. He that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. By rejecting the Apostle John, his authority and his petition, Diotrephes is rejecting the Christ and the Father. That's where he set himself with his desire for preeminence. Here's someone that is a big fish in a little pond, and he wants to stay that way. And when he receives word from an apostle, no, they might listen to him more than me. And so he finds a way. What methods does he use? Now John's going to describe that in verse 10. We talk about Diotrephes. He's known for selfish ambition. Loves to have the preeminence. Put me out front. Everybody pat me on the back. If you can get a hand in edgewise from where I'm patting myself on the back. Loves to have the preeminence. He's also known for shunning authority. He wouldn't receive John. He wouldn't receive the ones John sent. And he's known for selfish actions. Now think about the behavior that he manifests. 3 John verse 10, remember wherefore, if I come, John says, if I come for a visit, I'll take care of him. I will remember his deeds which he doeth. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm Diotrephes, I'm going to get a little bit nervous sitting on that high chair. if I come, I'll remember the deeds that he does. I'm going to remember the way he behaves. How does he behave, John? He prates against us with malicious words. He's sowing discord. How else does he behave, John? He's not content with that. That's not enough for him. Neither does he himself receive the brethren. He's sowing discord. He's denying aid. And he's forbidding them that would. He's exercising a dominance. He's making decisions in areas of judgment or expediency or personal judgment for other Christians. He's telling brethren not to have faithful brethren in their house for dinner. Now, John told faithful brethren not to entertain and send on their way and lend credence and support to the unfaithful and the false teachers, 2 John verses 8 and following. But here, Diotrephes is the polar opposite of what John wrote to the elect lady. Diotrephes is refusing to receive the faithful, and he's exercising his authority. He is muscling his might to prevent those that would. Sounds like a real peach, doesn't he? And casteth them out of the church. He's guilty of discord. He's guilty of denying brethren. He's guilty of exercising a dominance that doesn't belong to him, and he's guilty of division. Who's Diotrephes? Is he the preacher? Is he an elder? Is he a member? All we know is that he's a headache. That's all we need to know. Those things being said, Proverbs 6, beginning in verse 16, these 6 things doth the Lord hate. A proud look, he loves to have the preeminence. A lying tongue prating against us, making false accusations with those malicious words. A proud look, a lying tongue. Hands that shed innocent blood. He's refusing aid to brethren. He'd rather see them starve than for him to receive them and aid them on their way. And apathy kills. Proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked imagination. Where did he get those lies that he's prating against them with malicious words? He's the one devising these things in his heart. Feet that be swift and running to mischief. False witness, the beak of lies. He that soweth discord among the brethren. Diotrephes was not content with the malicious words, but he went further. Those feet so swift in running to mischief that he prevented others from receiving the faithful. Everything God hates is manifest in Diotrephes. And here's what's scary. Today's Diotrephes may have been yesterday's Demetrius. Who's Demetrius? He's the one that gets discussed in verse 12 that has a good report. Diotrephes today. What's the cause? What motivates him? Ambition, like we've already discussed. The stinginess and the refusal to receive, those are just symptoms. They're not the cause. His refusal to receive the brethren, his troublemaking mindset, is all motivated by his avarice for attention. It's his ambition. Accolades, esteem, authority, ambition. So the cause, ambition. The candidate. Who could be in Diotrephes? Anybody. Here are the kind of words that you'll hear from Diotrephes today. Diotrephes is the one that says, my family's been with this congregation for 4 generations. So, what's that mean? Does that mean when it comes to the decisions of the elders that your voice means more? What are you saying here? I gave $100,000 to build. I met Diotrephes face to face, folks. Standing in the church building of a small congregation of God's people further east in Tennessee, on a day when a congregation pretty much split down the middle, he stood right there in the middle of the church building and said, I built this church. And what he meant was he'd given the money to construct the meeting house. Side note, every time you and I talk about this building as the church, we facilitate that mindset. We contribute to it. Every time. That misunderstanding of what the church actually is. Does our vocabulary reflect a denominational approach to what the church is, or the Lord's approach? So Diotrephes is the one that will say, I built this church, or I gave $100,000. I got this program going. I put in the work to get these care groups together. I put in the work to start this evangelism effort. Oh, you need another pat on the back? You know, the people that get the most pats on the back are the ones that need burped. And sometimes the ones that think they need it all the time are just about as mature. I taught here for 40 years in Bible class. Again, should we be grateful for that? Absolutely, positively. Does that carry additional weight when it comes to this congregational decisions? I was here before any of those elders. I've been here longer than them. They're boys to me. Over which the Holy Ghost has made them overseers. I've been an elder longer than the other elders combined. Diotrephes is still around. Diotrephes may be the one whose very presence got the church through a difficult period 10 years ago. But now he's the reason they're struggling. Because he's got such a chip on his shoulder from all the efforts that he put forward the last time. Diotrephes is scary. He's dangerous. And he's real. The cause, the candidate, what's the cure? The same thing for anything else, action. Diotrephes is not going to stop being Diotrephes if the congregation says, well, that's just his personality. Just like with that brother in Corinth that was in a sin that was tearing the church apart and bringing reproach on Christ's people, they needed to take action there. And congregations that are dealing with the Diotrephes today need to take action as well. Up to and including realizing the fact that if he's that much of an enemy to the truth, he's in gross error. His soul's in jeopardy. He's refusing to receive the brethren. The Lord's going to refuse to receive him. So, Diotrephes today, the cause, ambition, the candidate, anybody. The cure, action. We'll stop right there. We'll pick up and talk about Demetrius when next we meet and then move forward from there. Thank you for your kind attention this evening.